Emily, Justin, thank you so much for joining me today.
Thank you for having us, Chris.
Thanks, Chris.
So I'm looking forward to this because today we are going to be talking a little bit about the idea of brand messaging. But before we get into that, before we start deep diving into anything or going down any rabbit holes, can you tell everyone a little bit about yourselves and how you've both ended up running, I believe, if I get the name right, Root and River?
That's right.
And tell us a little bit about yourselves and Root and River.
You bet. So at Root and River, we believe that courage turns movements into brands. And so we work with courageous leaders in order to help them uncover and articulate their brand message and then roll that out internally first, because all things at Root and River begin internally first, and then to the market through storytelling, through the words of mouth. We're very practical, but we take a very deep spiritual dive into the soul of the brand to start things off. So we're a bit defiant, and our clients are defiant as well. And they want to change the world or their industry with their brand. And there's just been struggling to find the precise words with which to do that very conversationally. So we love our work, and we began working together in 2015. Before that, I was a VP of corporate communication. And prior to that, I worked in PR, marketing, social. And then I started my career actually as a journalist. So I spent about almost 10 years writing, coaching writers, worked my way up started as an education reporter, and then eventually became a publisher of a group of community weekly newspapers. So my passion is all around language and storytelling, and how do you really get through all of the bullshit to get to the actual truth of a story that is usually very complicated and messy, and that's sort of my favorite part of storytelling.
I love it. And what about you, Justin?
Yeah, as Emily said, we actually met coming up on 7 years ago at a conference that she was running. She was kind of the MC of this conference, and I was just immediately impressed by Emily. And I didn't know at the time that I'm like, well, this is my next business partner, but I was sort of looking. I've been doing brand strategy for, well, now 18 years. So at the time it would have been like 13 years or 11 years, whatever it is. And, but I was specifically looking based off of sort of intuition for a woman business partner. I saw that there was this emergence of kind of feminine power that was coming forward that has been fulfilled in many ways on the world stage in various, CEOs and world leaders and whatnot that are women. And so my own background, as I mentioned, I've been doing this in some form in the last 18 years, I've owned a couple of ad agencies. I was the CMO of a startup. I was the CMO for a consulting firm, 2 different consulting firms. Kind of a contract CMO role. And prior to that, I was in corporate sales. I was in B2B sales, working my way up from, in the first one, working my way up from being pound the streets sales guy to VP of sales of that company. And then became the VP of sales of another software company. And part of my roots are, which sort of influence my kind of worldview, is I grew up on a cattle ranch in Eastern Oregon. So I grew up in nature. I grew up in entrepreneurism. I grew up in hard work ethic, things like that. And that background has served me well, because I did not go the traditional route. I went to college, but I dropped out 3 times. I didn't do a traditional route. And so that ranching and agricultural background has always kind of been a baseline for, like, when it's daylight, you work. And if there's work to be done, you do it. And, so that sort of has been a driving factor for me.
That's awesome. So you guys meet at this conference and boom, like you get on immediately and you decide this is something you want to do, or one of you plays a little bit harder to get. I'm guessing Emily, if I have to be honest.
Yes, you guessed
makes
correct.
Justin work for it.
That's right, Chris. Your instincts are spot on there. No, we meet. I had actually seen Justin speak at that same conference a couple of years prior, and I thought he was a tremendous speaker, but I went and, cyber stalked him, because why wouldn't you? And I saw at the time some of his his social footprint was, it was, yeah, not exactly in line with kind of my jam. So I was like, oh, we won't be friends, but I respect his craft. Fast forward a few years, we meet. It was a little bit, and this is the heart of our relationship, is a bit of a iron sharpens iron kind of a relationship where we clang swords and we battle. And I sometimes say, I think I was the first person to tell Justin, like, no, and disagree with him. And just, so because of that conflict, we were intrigued with each other and our ideas, whereas we would have different ways of coming at things, our perspectives were very aligned as well. So it was interesting. It's like turmoil above, but down below in the under the soil, there was a common bond of, you know, that marketing and branding had just become just a bunch of crap and a lot of just selling of tactics and obsession with chasing what's next, and that what was missing was true deep inquiry and reflection, and the benefit that would come from doing that for businesses and honing in on language that was real and true and not full of convincing and coercion. So we had that shared passion. So we fought, and he pitched me. He eventually ended up coming into the company that I worked at to help me with the brand and solidify the brand. But you're right. I did make him work for it a little bit. I'm sure he has his take on that.
That is true.
His version is completely different.
No, that's spot on. Yeah, I got, yeah, there's nothing really to add there. It's, you know, one of the things we do, Chris, that is our kind of our flagship experience is called a root session. And a root session is a day-long immersion into the brand that's sort of part therapy, part boot camp, part deconstruction, part reconstruction. But we establish these things called the elements of trust. And one of them is no silent dissent. And that is something that really drives us, that we understand we're both creatives in our own way. We both have an obsession and admiration for language and the way language is used to create meaning in the world. And like all art, it requires some tension. And so that dynamic of that iron sharpens iron dynamic, we bring into each client engagement as well. So we have many times in a root session or in a follow-up call with a client disagreed. Like we have a disagreement. Now we're not unprofessional about it, but what that does is it shows the client that we both have our best interests in mind, and that we're writing for their brand, not just ours. Like we're fully committed to their experience. But that iron sharpens iron started in basically our very first conversation in January of 2014, and has continued into everyone since. I mean, we've gotten to know each other quite well, and we have interesting dynamics. We live in different cities. You know, we're business partners and creative partners, but we have other relationships, and so it's a unique dynamic that is somewhat miraculous, that we're here and we're doing this, and we still love it. We still love each other. We're still doing what we do. Still love our clients. So there's some mystery, some beautiful mystical momentum to what we're doing in the world.
But I think this is awesome, hearing you guys talk about this in this way, and the idea of iron strengthens iron, and the clashes that actually bring people closer to either a realization or to achieving something. And I think that's what's really important, right? And it's something that you guys have mentioned there. So, you know, you'll have a disagreement about your writing styles, or about, you know, something in particular, your creative differences, and how that can really help the client. But what I think is really important about that is, you said it at the end, you said, you know, it's showing them that it is all about them. It's not about your personal gains. And this, to me, is something that's really important for all businesses when they're creating any kind of marketing, where they forget it's not about them, and it's not me, and it's not, you know, but I want to come across as if we're X, Y, and Z. And you're like, well, that doesn't work, because you're not X, Y, Z. You guys are definitely ABC. There's no correlation. People won't understand. When they meet you, they'll think there's something wrong, or they think they're being catfished by a company, you know, and this just isn't the way it works. So I'm wondering if you guys can go into a little bit of detail on this, but how do you help clients to really understand that first and bold step in terms of those root sessions maybe, but you've got to be yourselves, you've got to be authentic. And when we say authentic, it's been used so often. I'm not talking about authentic Instagram self here. I'm talking about just be who you are, talk the way you do, come across as you are in the office, and do that sort of stuff when it comes to their marketing.
Yeah, it's a great point, Chris. And we run into this all the time. Our clients, it started to dawn on them that the great culture that they've built and the environment that they have cultivated very carefully has never truly been articulated. And so, but they're standing in that truth and the truth of the world, or not the truth of the world, the influence of the world that tells them they have to manufacture a brand, or they have to present a certain way that will be likable to everyone else. And that doesn't feel right. And the fact that they've never really said who they truly are doesn't feel right anymore either. And so we find them, or they find us at this moment where they're trying to sort out the middle ground there. And when we come in and we say, you already have a brand, it already exists. And what we're going to do, we're going to be archivists, and we're going to uncover the truth of that brand, and we're going to articulate it in a way that you may already be using some language in your everyday interactions inside of your company that really reflect the brand, and we're just going to refine that. They feel so relieved. They're like, oh, you mean I don't have to create this false persona? You mean I don't have to pretend to be something I'm not? We can just be who we already are and tell that story better and be more succinct and be more concise and be less concerned about whether people like us. Because one of our core tenets is that branding is actually much more about repulsion than it is about attraction. And that's the idea that we invite our clients into. We're programmed to be liked, we're programmed to be accepted and to seek that acceptance. But that's actually a hindrance when you're looking at branding. You have to come at it from a space of, I am going to say and do things in alignment with my beliefs that will repel the people who are not a match for me. And by repelling them, I save my time, resources, energy, so that I don't have to one day fire a client or just feel miserable in the work that we do, every day. And so it's this huge, tremendous, exhale when they realize they don't have to do that. All they have to do, there is some work to it, is to summon the courage and the bravery to stand in that truth and to say, this is who we are, this is how we see the world, and this is who we're looking for to join our movement.
Yeah, I think.
Sorry,
Chris,
Justin.
Oh, sorry, Chris. I talked over you. Just a few little nuggets to add to that. We have found that there's kind of two primary drivers that cause a squishy or unformed message. One of them is not lack of effort. Almost every one of our clients has tried to work on this in some form. Many of them have hired agencies that come up with, bullshit slogans or cheesy one-liners. And so they're frustrated with that aspect, but they're frustrated that they can't do it either. And so those two factors are, the first is sort of a misplaced humility. This idea that branding yourself or drawing attention to yourself is somehow means that, you're an ambulance chaser if you're an attorney, or, you're the mattress salesman on late night television. Like there's a negative connotation to the process of branding marketing, a well-deserved negative connotation, because marketers have created that. Marketers have wrecked a lot of what the original intention of marketing is, which is to have meaningful conversations. So that misplaced humility is one thing that we help them overcome. And the other is an identity crisis. I find this especially true. We find this especially true in companies that have been in business for a while. Maybe they're still the founder or the CEO of the company has been there for a while, and they've kind of lost who they are. They're a little bit like a divorced dad, that doesn't really know who he is, but is trying to get himself back out there. And so that's where gentleness comes in. So the ass kicking comes in on don't misplace your humility, use humility, but it's not a branding strategy. And then the gentleness to say, we get it. We know what it's like to not know in your core about who you really are. But we promise you that when you do that work as a large organization or a solo brand, it doesn't matter to us, When you do that inner work, it will produce an outer fruit of a message that you're excited to share with the world. And all the feelings you have that are the opposite of that, the opposite feelings of maybe what you have now, like dread or insecurity or lack of confidence, all of that comes from, as Emily said, the courage to do the inner work to produce that outer language.
I think it's huge because, again, so many people, like you mentioned, marketers have a bad reputation and everyone gets painted with the same brush. In fact, now there's so many branches of marketing that people are screwed. Like they're looking around, they're trying to figure out who they should hire, and most of them can't figure it out. We worked recently with a recruitment firm. We're helping them with some social media stuff. Looked at their website. I was like, look, I know you guys aren't paying us to do this or anything else. You haven't even asked for it. Here's a quick Loom video, and it's going to point out why I think everything that we're doing for you is a waste, because we're pushing people to a website which then has absolutely nothing to do with all this content that we're creating. So we need to look at that, or you need to look at that, or somebody else needs to look at that, whatever you want to do. But from everything you've told me, that doesn't reflect anything of what we've spoken about. And those kind of conversations can be quite difficult. Some people take them the wrong way. Some people take them as, I built my business and I earn money, and you're like that. I'm not saying that you don't, but you're asking me to try and get your results online, and that's a very different thing. But the negative brush that we've kind of been painted with has ended up meaning that everybody from, I've had clients say to me, well, my cousin's nephew's boy can do social media for us. And you go, yeah, cool. Like, my nephew's 10, he can write technically. I wouldn't get him to write the brand messaging for my business. But, where are we kind of going with this? What's the idea of it? And I think it's hard for people to understand the elements that actually go into it. When somebody really cares about the brand, or when somebody cares about their client, they put a lot of effort into actually understanding who the person is. And 95% of the times when I work with startups, so we help out in WeWork Labs here in London. And one of the first things that we often get asked is, how do I set up my brand guidelines? How do I set up my brand tone of voice? And we're sat there going, right, how many people are there in the company? There's one. Okay, cool. You are the brand guidelines. You are the brand voice. I was like, what sort of colors do you wear? I only ever wear blue and gray t-shirts. Great. We got a color scheme. How do you speak? You're like that. Like, honestly, keep it super simple when you're first starting out. And I think it's something that people have really lost because of all the, I don't want to use the word charlatan, but there you go. I've thrown it out there now. But there's a lot of people out there, selling that amazing, this one funnel will solve all your problems. You'll make millions of dollars. It's not about that. It is about finding that right voice and everything else. And Emily, what you mentioned earlier about repulsion as much as attraction, I think that's huge. We often refer to it here in the UK. We've got something called Marmite. I don't know if you guys have ever tried Marmite. Okay, cool. So Marmite, right? The advertising campaign for Marmite is you either love it or you hate it. Full stop, straight up. There is no in between. And invariably, you never meet anyone that's kind of like, I don't mind. So we talk about it as ourselves, saying, James and I, my co-founder or our partner now, literally we are Marmite. You'll either jump on a call with us and you'll enjoy because we mess about, we kind of take the piss out of each other and we'll have a bit of banter as we call it. But literally you'll either like that and immediate go, this could be a fun environment, or you'll go, not for us. We're looking for like the KPMG or Accenture kind of consultants. We want shirts, ties, and prim and proper 400-page reports to tell me what's going on in the world. Cool. It's not us, but that's okay. So how do you help clients to overcome the fear of kind of, I don't want to upset anyone because I desperately need the business, or I need the clients. I can't afford to scare anybody.
Well, early on when we were developing our philosophies around what we call intrinsic branding, which is the type of branding that we practice, we had this moment of, okay, we believe that, brands begin on the inside and it is about truth telling, and that can be painful. We believe in repulsion and all of our own brand principles. Okay, so we have to practice it. So the best way we can prove our philosophies is to practice them ourselves. And so we set about very intentionally to share our heretical ideas with the world and our content on our website. In our speeches, we both speak publicly quite a bit, and what we present is not like anything else out there. And so as a result of that, intrinsic branding works, because who is attracted to you after all that repelling effort are the people who are aligned with what we believe. So we never, I will say never, very intentionally there, we never get on a call with a prospect who hasn't already bought into our way of thinking. Now they may be nervous. They may not have had like the full courage to like, that's why they come to us. They want that extra boost of courage and a kick in the ass and the encouragement, the pat on the head, but they're aligned with our thinking. And so we bring that to our clients and we explain that. We say that's how we connected. And what we're going to do is we're going to walk you through this practice to help you do the same. And so there's fear, because fear is real as part of the human experience. But once they begin to see what they attract because of that, it's a pretty easy switch. And just to sort of build on what you were saying before, not only are there charlatans in marketing that pitch all these quick fixes, there's also just a ton of options. And I think the plethora of different marketing tactics just overwhelms people with complexity. And our practice is very simple. It's about speaking the language of the brand that you've carefully crafted. We've uncovered and crafted together consistently across your platforms, across your storytelling, in your visuals. And so it is, again, a relief to be able to do that and take that very simple approach and then layer on tactics as they become relevant. So there's not a lot of convincing, I guess, to answer your question. It's sort of meeting them where they're at, addressing their concerns and saying, can you give this a try? Because maybe you've tried complexity in the past and you came looking for us. So here we are.
And I think that we understand the way humans operate and the dichotomy between the emotional brain and the logical brain, and the over conditioning for most, especially American businesses, of the left brain, of the rational brain. And so that's why we say we're a blend of spiritual and practical. So some of the practical things that boost that confidence is we are both very well-versed in behavioral science and the understanding of human behavior, from Hartman's axiology stuff to DISC, all those things, like understanding humans and what motivates them and drives them. The second part of it is that we bring, and this goes to, we're sort of left brain, being able to have a framework to work within of ontological structures. So in an ontological structure with our clients, we go to context, which is the root, which then establishes the mindset that you have as you go to the market and the way that the market responds. Then it has your behaviors, which are your tactics. Then it has your outcomes. And very similar, Chris, to what you said about going and looking at somebody's website and going, well, it doesn't really matter what we do because you have this issue. We look at the same thing, like, well, what are your current outcomes? And I would boldly say we could, and outside of having a shitty product or customer experience, if you're not getting the outcomes you want with your marketing, you can trace it all the way back to the context of language, and you're just not that interesting. Humans are, nobody's sitting around waiting to hear from you, no matter what a marketer tells you. You have to earn that attention, and you don't earn that attention by being passive. One of my favorite quotes is from John Eldridge, which is, let the world feel the weight of who you truly are and let them figure it out. And that's very much our approach too, that we cannot transfer you courage. We can just remind you that you're doing this thing because you want to make an impact in the world. And if you leave it unspoken or if you water it down, that's on you. It's not the marketplace. That's on you.
I think a lot of people confuse what we're talking about with, like you mentioned earlier, the catchy slogan or the buzzword filled jargon that they chuck on their website, holistic brand visualization, strategic analysis. And you're like, what the fuck does that mean? But the ultimate goal is actually, when you try and break this down in the simplest form, and again, for everyone listening, small business owners especially, your headline on your website is kind of your first or your only 15-second chance to kind of grab somebody's attention. And I think that's huge. And you mentioned again there, a bad product, shitty customer service. It's, they say, well, we say every now and again, but you can't polish a turd, right? It's
right.
if it's a bad product, it's a bad product, but the marketplace should be telling you that by the fact that no one's ever bought it, whether you talk to them, sell to them, get a referral from somebody or anything else. If it's just that bad, it's not working. But actually the language side of things is huge. But more importantly, even just the clarity within language. I think that we often confuse using, like, it's a bit like Joey in Friends when he discovers the thesaurus and
Yeah.
rewrites a letter, and changes every single word till it's lost all meaning.
Yes.
And sometimes, if you can say something in 3 words, say it in 3. You don't need to make that 10. If you can say something in its most simplest form, and that's how you would normally describe it, say it in the most simplest form and use the same language that you would use if you were on a call with a client, to kind of give that uniformity of experience as well, so that you don't see someone suited and booted on a very professional looking video talking really high level strategic stuff, and then actually when somebody meets you, you're just really into the weeds in your hoodie, t-shirt, hair all over the place. And then basically they're kind of wondering what happened to the guy they saw on the video originally.
Right.
Right. Yeah. And there's this tremendous risk and falseness. And I don't know why so many people have bought this idea of creating this manufactured reality, because it just puts you and your business at risk, and it creates an immediate barrier between you and your audience. And once that distrust is sown, it's impossible to overcome. And I think that we talk a lot in our practices about saying less when we could say more. One of our tenets is to make every word count. And that refers to the fact that we are so passionate about the words that we select. They have to be aligned sort of spiritually with what you're trying to express. And they also have to really reflect what the brand is about. And there's this tendency, and there has been this tendency in marketing, to explain everything. Mm-hmm. Well, I got to explain what my product is. I got to explain my service because, it's so different. No, nobody cares. Until you express something that's real and emotional and true, nobody gives a shit. Nobody cares. And neurologically, I said that sort of glibly, but neurologically, all decisions are made in the emotional center of the brain. And they're made in less time than it takes you to blink your eyes. So 15 seconds would be a great amount of time for somebody to spend on the headline on your website, but really it's a lot less than that. And so getting those words honed in to the 5 or 7 words, we help our clients craft a brand narrative, and that begins with what we call a root belief statement. And those are typically no more than 7 words. And that's what goes at the top of the website. And it's an immediate reaction of repulsion or attraction. And it's like, yes, I want to join the movement. It's a call. It's a statement of how you see the world, or the change you want to bring to the world. And that is what will trigger that emotional response. And not in a manipulative way, but in a way that comes from your own truth and expresses that truth. Again, an expression and not an explanation. That can happen later. That can happen kind of way later, or just down the page.
And part of that, Chris, is that we start with what's most true for you. So we say that your message isn't what your market wants to hear. Often they don't want to hear it. They don't care. It's what you have to say, what your heart has to say to the world, or your soul has to say to the world. So one of the exercises we often do is, like, we call it 2 shots of tequila. So what do you really want to say? Because if you can get to that truth, even if it's harsh or negative to start off with, the negativity bias of the mind, and righteous indignation, you shouldn't market that way, but it's a great starting point because it stirs passion. It's like, I'm mad as hell and I'm not going to take it anymore. That type of feeling, like getting into that and getting into those maybe uncomfortable feelings, or, we sometimes will probe, like, what do you want to say to a client that chooses an inferior competitor of yours? What do you really want to say to them? What do you want to say to other people in your industry that are wrecking the reputation of your industry? And so we're poking and provoking them to speak the truth. And it's an interesting thing to watch them, because especially if they come from a more corporate background, or maybe they're a little bit older and they're not millennials, they're, Gen Xers or boomers, and they'll say something and be like, okay, that's close, but I don't believe you. And we'll say that to them. I don't believe you. I don't believe you. And watch them move forward until finally it bursts out of them and the energy in the room changes. And the thing is, there's drift here, Chris, because we'll leave that session, they'll be fired up, and then we'll be working on copy, and pretty soon they forget that. So we're always like months into an engagement, we are reminding them, remember that feeling in the room? That's the feeling. And if you drift away from that, you're drifting away from that authenticity. You're drifting away from the spiritual component of your brand.
James, our commercial director, really drills people on their why. So when we're talking about things and we're trying to understand a brand, you're like, that cool, yeah, but why? Like, why'd you set up? Why'd you do this? Or why'd you choose that? And he's basically got it down now to a fine art. And I think it's thanks to his toddler son. And basically he'll just keep asking, yeah, but why? And he'll just keep going. And literally you can sort of see people's faces going, oh, they're not going to let this go. And we've gone a couple of hours into a strategy session and literally it's just him going, oh, that's interesting. So why do you think that is important for clients? And here we go again, another layer deep. And I think it is exactly that. You know, once you do get that feeling of I've just found it, or I've just managed to vocalize it, and potentially even for the first time since, you know, usually it's an initial thought and it's that fleeting moment when they decided they were going to set up a business, the real driving passion, like you said, you know, not happy with competition, not happy with the way the industry was working, not happy with certain things. And actually people finding that is a hugely powerful, I was going to say an aphrodisiac, that's not the right word. It's a hugely powerful emotion that hits them that really kind of reminds them of exactly why they're doing it, which again, like as a business owner, we can all relate to. It can be easy to lose. Right. By the time you've done your accounts and sorted out some legal stuff, and then you wrote some stuff, and then you did some other bits, and then somebody called you, and then there was a problem, and then there was an issue, and then you fire fought for a bit this afternoon. And by the end of the day, you're kind of like that. Oh, why did I start this? Remind me again. So I think it is a challenge for that. But how do you think that small businesses, especially, because I think small businesses always think, you know, well, I don't have means, I don't have resources, I don't have time. No one ever has these things. But how do you think small businesses can help themselves to kind of do a bit of introspection, look at their brands, look at themselves, and try and really maybe a couple of questions that they can ask themselves as listeners today, and kind of work on that for their business and for their brand messaging?
Yes, absolutely. And it's available, you know, these techniques are available. We write about them a lot on our blog. So please go check that out if you have a little bit of time and just your attention. So I'll talk about mission and maybe Justin can talk about message, but those are two key elements for any business owner to really dive into and spend some time considering. So mission, we believe in missions. We don't believe in mission statements because they suck and they're stupid and nobody cares. But your mission, and the way we define it, is the thing you are here to do that no one else can do. And that sounds really grand and quite, you know, self-aggrandizing, but it is, you're here, you come with a particular set of skills, a background, people that you love, that love you, it's all influenced you. And you've been put here in this time to do something. And that is connected to your work, that is connected to yourself, at home. It's all one thing. So what is the thing you're here to do that only you can do? And to help with that question, because it is so big, is, you know, if somebody just showed up at your doorstep and gave you $50 million, what is it that you would want to use that money to tackle? What is the thing that you've always known to be very, very true for you that no one ever taught you? So maybe from the early childhood, you've always had this belief in something. Maybe it's something lacking in the world, or it's something that you want to, that gets your blood pumping literally. Like you feel a rush when you think about it. And those are things that can help you sort of calibrate to your mission. Our mission at Root and River, again, it's super simple, is to inspire people to go inward. And so it's this big thing, and it's also very small. It's this thing we do every day, and it also becomes a rubric for us when we're looking at projects, when we're looking at clients, when we're looking at ways we want to execute on our own strategy. Does this fit the mission? And if it veers off course, we don't do it. And sometimes that's a financial hit we take. But we know that if we stay true to our mission, we love what we do, we're happy, and other good things happen in the world. So yeah, reflect on the thing you're here to do. What are you here to do that only you can do? And what have you always known to be true? And if somebody gave you $50 million, how would you use it towards the betterment of the world?
Yeah, and I think on the language side of that, Chris, for a small business owner, or messaging is to understand what your desired goals are. You know, for most people, that's like increased revenue, increased leads, things like that. You know, it's pretty standard KPIs to have a successful, you know, functional small business. And so what the difference is between, it's the same thing a big giant brand would have. They would have the same sort of KPIs, at least from, you know, on the surface. The difference is that they can afford to have an ad campaign that doesn't work. They can go spend $20 million on an ad campaign that doesn't really drive sales, and maybe it wins the ad agency and Addy award, and everyone feels the only people that like the ad are the people in the company because, you know, they paid for it. Like, you know, that type of feeling. If you're a small business owner, you don't have that. You don't have the luxury of sucking at stuff like that. And so we always talk about with our clients, especially small business owners, is that whatever your budget is for marketing, make sure that you set aside enough to get the language right, because your tactics are going to change over time. But if you get the language right, you can use that in perpetuity. I mean, Disney is still basically using the same language that Walt Disney came up with in their promotion, or Southwest Airlines here in the United States, you know, a 50-year-old, 60-year-old company still using much of the same language that they've always had. Or Nike is another example. Rolls-Royce, another example. And these what we can learn, what small business owners can learn from them, is when you know the soul of your brand, you always have something to talk about. It's not really about your products. That's not what people are buying, or your services. That's the surface mind, conscious mind stuff. What people are buying is a relationship, and it's based off of trust. And if you use the words of your soul, other people will go, I recognize that. Oh, that, I want to tell me more. And it's the lean in, it's the limbic response. And that's the investment that is in my opinion, the most important first investment to make. Then when you are working with the tactical side, so think about, like, if we were to refer you clients, it would be that whoever's doing your marketing execution, whether it's email marketing or some sort of whatever, digital, whatever, doesn't matter, that the partner you choose gets you and understands you. And I know you had a episode, I think it was your last episode, about only working with people that bring you joy. And I think that goes especially with small business owners. Like, choose people to work on your brand with you, or your marketing with you, that you love to be around. Like, they're energy positive. And what that will do is that'll bring a totally different dynamic than most small business owners, unless they have a marketing background, view marketing as almost like an obligatory task, you know, like eating their peas or doing their taxes. When you're working with the right people, and there's that beautiful synchronicity and simpatico, it feels entirely different, and marketing becomes fun and it becomes interesting. And so those are some of the things that we think about with small business owners.
I couldn't agree more. And I think we've had two particular clients in the space of this year, especially with COVID and everything else. One who referred to us as, our catch-ups feel like catching up with family. And I wasn't sure if that was a good thing or a bad thing, but she assures me with her family, it's a good thing. And the second was a message that we just got a couple of days ago, literally saying, from a client saying, you know, honest to God, I'm so happy to have you guys on board. This actually feels like a partnership. And again, this is somebody who's run multiple businesses, worked with a ton of different agencies and marketers and freelancers and everything else. It's this idea of actually getting to know and getting that feeling right. And when you've got it right, like you said, not only does marketing feel nicer to do in general, but it also usually works better as well. Because there is a free flowing conversation, because we get them, they get us. And actually we both are on the same level in that way. And again, I know how hard it is for small businesses, especially especially starting, you know, you need revenue. You're desperate to try and find that revenue. And we talked a little bit about this before we actually hit the record button, but it can also be the worst thing for your small business to chase the wrong revenue, to bring in the wrong type of clients, to I think you called it an energy tax, Justin, where it drains you physically, emotionally, whatever it might be, trying to work with the wrong kinds of people or that aren't the right fit. And honest to God, we talk about this a lot. Work with people who bring you joy, because it'll, one, be fun, but two, it won't feel like work. And ultimately, if you set up your own small business, that was the idea. You didn't want to work for somebody else and have that kind of Sunday night blues or Monday morning blues, but also the fact that actually it just makes life better. I think the stats put it as like an average person will work 90,000 hours in their lifetime. And I think if you look at that from an entrepreneur or small business owners, I'm pretty sure we can probably ramp that up by 20-30%, which means actually like the majority of your life, other than sleeping, is spent working. Why on earth would you want to do it with people that make you miserable?
Yep.
You're
Absolutely. Here. Yep. I agree.
Guys, listen, this has been absolutely awesome. I've really enjoyed this. And to be fair, I haven't even noticed the time run past. Emily, you did mention earlier about your website and stuff, but where can people find you both online, and what do you recommend that they check out? And we'll make sure that we put links in the show notes as well.
Thank you so much. Yes, we are at rootandriver.com. That's all spelled out. It's ROOT and river. And there you can find our blog. Just click on musings and you'll see we've written the last 5 years. We're very prolific. So we've written a lot. We also have a community called Being Marketers, and that's really for people who are the head of marketing, whether you're the CEO or co-founder or you are the CMO in an organization. And we produce some specific content there just for you. We also do, every other month, we do a Being Marketers webcast, and that is open to everyone. So we have one coming up in January. Is it January? Yeah, January 7th. It's the first Thursday of the month. So you want to check that out. And we have these great conversations with marketing leaders and pick their brain a little bit. I'm on social media as well. You can follow Root and River on social media, at Root and River, or my personal social media is at Emily at Large.
Yeah, and we also have a book. Emily and I released a book earlier this year called Rooting Up: Essays on Modern Branding, and it's essentially it's not so much of a how-to. It's a change of thinking about branding, and that's available on Amazon. And then I'm at Foster Thinking on Twitter, Instagram, all that, and it's important to us that we both have our own, for lack of a better term, personal voice in this too. So we're a band, but we also have our own personalities, and that keeping that sovereignty is something we recommend with any partnership. Is keeping your sovereignty keeps the partnership thriving. And so you'll notice that Emily and I talk about very different, sometimes similar things, but very different things on social media, on our own personal feeds, which I think makes us more well-rounded and more interesting, that we're not just 24/7 talking about branding, because we like branding, but not that much.
We all need other hobbies, right?
That's right. Yeah.
Guys, thank you so much for coming on. And I'm looking forward to getting this episode out.
Thank you, Chris.
Thank you for having us.